I completed the Boston Marathon 5 times, and it was in 2013. There was a bomb at the marathon, and I was about a block away when that bomb went off. Completely changed my life. I did not even know if I was going to get home. I didn't know if I was going to see my boys again, and the most kind of shocking thing for me was that my race actually didn't matter, even though I had been training so hard for this race for so many months. My family mattered most. And then I just kept on asking myself that day, am I really living to my full potential? And why am I here? Why am I still here?
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. I have a brand new friend with me today, and I am so excited to introduce you to her. But before I do, I need you to follow this podcast and share it with the world because we all need a little more productive joy. We definitely need a shot of B12, and we need people like Dr. Cindra to make amazing things happen in our brains. So today is a great day for you to listen, and it's a great day for you to share. We have a fabulous guest with us today. Her name is Dr. Cindra Kamphoff. She is lots of amazing things. She is a best-selling author. She's a coach. She is the founder of the Mentally Strong Institute. She's a podcaster. She's a mom and a dog mom. She loves flowers, particularly petunias, has lots of pink ones in her yard. She is a runner to the tune of 15 marathons, and she did so collegiately. And now she coaches athletes, and she's our guest today. Welcome, Cindra, to Productive Joy.
Thank you, Dr. Christie. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to just share whatever I possibly can with the listeners.
Yeah, and I know you're going to, and I'm going to give you a platform right now to get people super excited. So people have a super short attention span and they need like a 30-second teaser. So what would you say to us in like 30 seconds that would get people to go, oh my gosh, I can't wait to listen to this episode?
Well, today we're going to talk about practical tools to be your best more often. And I think everyone gets in their own way, that we all have head trash that, really doesn't serve us and is not helping us have more joy. And so today we're going to talk about practical tools to help you have more joy in your life and have more confidence, which actually we know confidence is a really fragile thing. So that's why you should keep listening.
Oh my gosh. And I cannot wait to pick your brain. So we got to back up though, because you just used a phrase that I am fully going to steal, and that's head trash. Okay. Tell me about head trash. Did you come up with that phrase? And give us a good example of what head trash might be.
So I love this acronym. It is published in Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Daniel Amen. And the acronym is ANTS, or Automatic Negative Thoughts. And I really love that acronym. I wish I would have known it 20 years ago when I was really struggling with my own confidence. I was a college runner, like you mentioned, and just had a lot of success in high school and then went to college and just kept on getting in my own way. And I think automatic negative thoughts are one of the things that prevents us from being our best more often, doesn't allow us to have more joy and live with purpose. And it's so easy to believe that trash talk.
Yeah.
But what I appreciate about the acronym is the word automatic, that most of our thoughts are automatic. They're not things that we necessarily choose all the time. And I think what's powerful is that we can choose to decide if we're going to believe them or not. And we can decide to keep leveling up our belief in ourselves and not listen to all the head trash that we tend to believe about ourselves or about the world.
I have heard of the ANTS acronym before, but now that you've added it to head trash, I think about how ants eat what's left. So they're eating the trash. You know what? You just painted a picture for me that I needed. And I think it's really important that you recognize, one, that this is happening, but that we don't have to listen to every thought that we have. I tell my kids that often. My kids are 24 and they are, living in that space where it matters so much what everybody else thinks. And they don't realize that it actually matters much more what you think. So you build confidence in people. You give them that ability to see what maybe others see, but they don't see themselves. Can you walk us through that process? How do you get people to go from I can't to not only can I, but I'm going to?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Christie, I want to start actually with a stat. So we are launching, and actually you can head over to confidencestudy.com. And we just did a national research study where we surveyed people all over the US, north, south, east, west, and in all different generations. And we're studying confidence actually for a couple of reasons. It's the number one reason people come to me as a performance coach and as somebody who works with business leaders and athletes and an executive coach. Like, that's the number one reason people come to me. So I wanted to really study it more. And the stat that I found that was most surprising is actually this one. 1 and 2 Gen Zers. So your sons
Yeah.
are Gen Zers. I have 2 sons that are Gen Zers, and that is ages 18 to 29. So 1 and 2 consistently or frequently feel like they're not enough.
Mm-hmm. And it's worse with boys, right? So I actually have a boy and a girl and a daughter-in-law now, but I have noticed that it seems to almost be worse with the boys than it is with the girls. And I don't know what's causing that, but do you see that in your research too?
We in that specific stat, we did not find any, like, gender differences, but I think the thing that surprised me most is that 1 and 2 Gen Zers, like,
That's crazy.
I know, it is actually crazy, and, how I would describe this is, on average, Gen Zers spend 6.5 hours on their phone,
Huh?
and they're the generation that, has grown up with social media and a phone in their hands. They were also right in the middle of COVID and growing up during COVID, and so they have lots of different things that they're struggling with. I think one of the things we also found is that we know confidence can fluctuate. As a sports person, I love this quote by Joe Montana, a legendary quarterback for the 49ers, and he said confidence is a fragile thing. And it's actually that's what we found is that confidence can come and go, and it's kind of like a thermometer, where it can kind of go up and down based on life experiences or setbacks or things that you're struggling with or adversity. And I think sometimes we think, hey, I'm 50 years old or I'm 40 years old, I should be confident. But it's actually something that I find when you are really pushing yourself and getting outside your comfort zone, that's when your confidence can take a hit. You've probably heard of imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Some women speak about that. And, I think that's connected to confidence. And imposter syndrome means to me is like you feel like you're a fraud or you're going to be found out.
Yeah.
But many times that is caused by our automatic negative thoughts and believing that.
Yeah. And not knowing what to listen to, right? Like we have those bad thoughts, but we also have good thoughts and we often ignore them. I'm a big fan of Jamie Kern Lima's book,
Yeah.
Worthy, which I feel like
Yeah.
goes right along with your research, right? So
Yeah.
you can be confident, but if you don't have self-worth, you also tend to think that you have to earn said whatever accolades or kindness, and you don't. You actually are worthy of those things. But when our confidence gets shaken, then our worth also gets shaken. So it's all very related, and I am super excited that you are not only studying it but finding things that are practical. And you've created not one but two books that go together, right? That talk about how to fix some of these things or how to attain them. Tell us about your books, who they're
Sure.
for, and
Okay.
how they might get some of us unstuck in this space.
So, my PhD is in performance psychology, which basically is the study of what makes people successful in all areas of life. And so, I wanted to write a book that I wish I had when I was in college, something that was really practical, easy to read. And so, my first book is called Beyond Grit, and it's about 10 practices to gain the edge and be a high performer. And to me, what a high performer is just somebody who's working to reach their potential.
Yeah.
And then my second book is on those same 10 practices, but related to leadership and business. And then I have a new book coming out in next September with Simon and Schuster called The Confidence Mindset. And it's all about 10 and several practices to continue to help you build confidence. And the way I think about confidence, Christy, is that it's like 4 things. I think it's a feeling that actually can come and go. Like maybe times where you've been speaking and you've been a little nervous. Speaking is people's number one fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Over death.
Yeah.
It's a feeling. It's also a decision that we can make in the moment. Confidence is a skill that you can keep growing, and it's a belief in yourself. And sometimes we think that we get the feeling of confidence confused with the belief in ourselves. That feeling comes and goes, but we can really use tangible tools to build confidence. And that's what I would tell a Gen Zer. We also found in our national research study that young millennials are also 1 and 2 consistently feel like they're not enough. And they, the same stat, they compare themselves to others. So 1
Yeah.
and 2 consistently compare themselves to others. And comparison is one of the inner limits. How I would describe it is one of the ways we get in our own way. And that prevents high performance and being our best consistently and prevents us from building confidence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so you clearly have given your life to this space, and I'm going to guess it had something to do with being a collegiate athlete and then recognizing, okay, I want to study what makes people tick. But who taught you that one, that you could pursue something like this, and two, then encouraged
Yeah.
you to get to the point where you didn't just know a little bit about it, you got your PhD in it, and now you're teaching other people about it. So where did that
Yeah.
come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just actually reflecting on with one of our coaches. So I have a coaching certification called the Mentally Strong Coach Certification, and so I help other people like learn these coaching practices. And one of our coaches asked me like, "When did you decide you wanted to do this?" And it was pretty early on. I was in high school, and my mom got me this magazine called the Runner's World magazine,
I
and
remember Runner's World.
stay here out. And I was always like, the first thing I would do, I remember getting in the mailbox and like walking back to our house and like opening up the mind body section. Like there's always an article about mindset in there that I loved reading. And then, I think it was my dad who really helped me just, because 20 years ago when I got my PhD, the field wasn't where it is today. And people who didn't have their own private practice. People, weren't talking about mindset as much as they are today or mental health. And, you know, I knew that's what I wanted to pursue. A lot of people along the way were like, "Well, you can't make a career in that." But I didn't listen to them, and
Right.
I'm glad I didn't because it's like clearly my passion. I did have this, about 12 years ago now, I was running the Boston Marathon, and so after I got out of college and I kind of throughout college, I really struggled with my own mindset and just kind of understanding myself and just consistently struggled with my own mental health and getting in my own way. And so that's one of the kind of crucible moments that led me to study this field. And then another crucible moment happened about 12 years ago. I got back into running after I graduated from college just to see like could I do something different now that I have different mindset tools.
Yeah.
And I ran the Boston Marathon. I've completed the Boston Marathon 5 times.
Wow.
I'm s But this year was, the year that changed my life, and it was in 2013 where, you might recall what happened in 2013. There was a bomb at the marathon, and I was about a block away when that bomb went off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, completely changed my life. Honestly, I did not even know if I was gonna get home. I didn't know if I was gonna see my boys again, and is very scary afternoon. And what I think with the most kind of shocking thing for me was that my race actually didn't matter, even though I had been training so hard for this race for so many months. It was like my family mattered most, which I think that's everyone's would
Sure.
be on their brain is their family. And then number 2, it was just like my own passion and my purpose. And I I just kept on asking myself that day, like, am I really living to my full potential? Am I really living into my purpose? And, why am I here? Why am I still here? And now that I understand these moments are called crucible moments where kind of life changes for you. And so I had been pursuing this, career in performance psychology, but being at the Boston Marathon, I think happened for me, meaning I think there's a reason I was there because it really woke me up to what I really was meant to do. And I wanted to write a book, but that was scary. I wanted to work for the Minnesota Vikings, but I didn't play football. So, I wanted to become a professional speaker, but that was really scary. And it was, I think we can all relate to that where there's been moments in our lives that changed everything for me. And that was the kind of moment that woke me up, I think, to what my real calling was.
How great that you not only woke up, but then you created tools for other people to wake up themselves, right? Like you recognized, okay, there were some things that happened to get me to this point. I can help people walk through that process. And that's what your books do. I'm sure this new one's going to be even more fantastic for getting people over their hump, over their ants, and getting them to the point where they're able to function at their best selves instead of just the one that they think they're capable of. I think that's really special, Dr. Cindra. Really, you're exceptional. And I hope people tell you that often, but you can feel it when you're in your presence. You can feel this. I am no nonsense going to get these things done, and I'm going to help you do the same, which is pretty remarkable. So well done on that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think I really appreciate that. And when when I got back from the marathon, I spent a lot of time trying to understand my own purpose, and I hadn't had like a purpose statement written out. I read a book that changed my life by a guy named Richard Leiter. It's called The Power of Purpose.
Mm.
And it made me just really think about what my purpose is. And, it took, I think, a purpose like pulling back the layers of an onion. It really takes some reflection on helping you kind of think about like, why am I here? What
Mm.
difference do I make? But after a lot of reflection, I think my purpose is actually to help people play bigger and, to be my authentic self to help people do that, but provide real tangible, easy to understand tools.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to me because when I was most struggling with my mental health and, in college, like I didn't, there's not like podcasts, 20 years ago, like this, there's no YouTube. And so, there was no kind of tools that I could learn to help me get unstuck. And so that's why I try to provide things that are really practical, easy to use so that anyone can use them if you're, 10 years old versus 100 years old. And because we just consistently get in our own way and can easily get stuck in our own way.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, so well said. So I have to ask you my favorite question because I feel like you found it for yourself. And this is a two-part question. So, the listeners that are listening right now are trying really hard to take all of the things that they're learning from our guests and turn them into action, right? Like taking the things that they're learning and actually using them instead of just hearing about them. And so my question is two-part. One, what is your definition of productive joy? And then the second part to that is how do you help people create it through your work? So go ahead, you can tackle that any way you wish.
Okay, that's a great question. My definition of productive joy is to really help people live with purpose. And I think creating joy is by living with your life's purpose and supporting others to do so. I think that's what productive joy is. I think when people understand what their purpose is and the reason they're here, I think it's a lot easier to find that joy.
Mm.
And I think sometimes it's so easy to kind of go through the motions and not really take a step back and say, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What difference do I make? And what the research shows is that we actually live up to 7 to 10 years longer when we understand our purpose and we live with purpose. And, when I think about joy and just that emotion, it kind of makes me go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you maybe heard of, where
Oh, yeah.
like at the bottom, right, is like safety and security. Like those are all the things that we need. But on the top is like our ability to live with purpose and to really like step into self-actualization. And that's where flow happens. That's, I think, where joy happens. And so many times we're so worried about the future or concerned about the past. Another research study I just came across by two Harvard researchers actually shows we only spend 47% of our time in the present moment. And most of our time is like thinking about all the what ifs and all the things that could go wrong. And, in the future, our emotions like pressure and anxiety, joy is really in the moment, in the present, appreciating and savoring the things that you have. And many times I think, Dr. Christie, is that we don't even pay attention to that and give ourselves moments to take a step back and just like appreciate the moment and appreciate the small things. We're just like looking forward to the next thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm terrible at that. I am in Enneagram 7, if you're familiar with the Enneagram personality test. And we are enthusiastic optimists, but we do not live in the moment. We brush right over any and all emotions, and we're just moving on to the next thing. And sometimes we can't enjoy the moment we're in for thinking about the next one. And I think that's a powerful thing to remind us of is, okay, if only 47% of our time is spent in the present, one, what are we doing with the present? How can we make that as valuable as possible? And then two, how do we grow that number and bring ourselves back to where we actually are? So creating that productive joy. You mentioned something that's kind of fun for me. So we're right around episode 200, which is awesome. And in those 200 episodes, I've always asked this question, and I've never gotten exactly the same answer twice. But there are some themes that have come up, and you just mentioned a couple of them. The biggest one being flow. That when you think about joy, flow tends to be the thing that brings that joy. When you're in that space where you don't have to think too hard, you just are there. And so, what advice would you have for people trying to find that flow and get into it in terms of all your teaching and all of the amazing things that you have in your book, what advice would you give them if they're out of flow and living in the future or the past or somewhere other than the present? How would you bring them back?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I think of flow, the way I think of it is conceptually by a psychologist named Csikszentmihalyi is his last name. And he studied not just athletes but artists. And many times people would describe flow as like deeply in the present moment where you're not judging yourself and time flies by or it speeds up. And in sports, I help athletes get into the flow. And many times we have to do things that we're passionate about to experience flow. But I call these several 3 F's, where that these are things that prevent us from getting into the flow. And I learned this from a psychologist named Susan Jackson, who wrote a book called Flow in Sports. And she says, like, future orientation is the thing that prevents us from getting in the flow, forcing it. So
Mm.
trying to say, like, I must get in the flow right now, and then focusing on the outcome. And so many times I can easily this is easily happens to me as well as I can be so focused on the goal or the outcome on what I really want that I'm not focused on the process,
Mm.
the small things that I really need to do to be successful. And athletes especially they spend a lot of time in the future. They're thinking about the next steps or the score or, are they going to win or not? And that just creates so much pressure and tension. So I think the best thing that you can do to experience flow more often is to really train yourself to be more in the present moment. And I think it's really, my book Beyond Grit covers 10 practices of high performance. And practice 6 is present moment focus. And because we are at our best when we're in the present moment. And that really, is 2 practices. It's number 1, noticing when your mind is not in the present and just gently getting it back. And we can do that in many different ways, even with a word just like present or be here, be now, maybe with a deep breath and just noticing the small things around us. We know that even when people practice mindfulness and meditation consistently, right, it changes the gray matter in your brain and there's like changes in your brain and people experience less stress and anxiety. So that's what I would say about the flow. I could add more things to that, but that's what I'd start with.
Well, and that's the thing. I want people to go find you and want them to learn all the things from you because you have a podcast also. And then you also have, well, you have your company, but then you also help people. So why don't you tell us, how would we find you? If the listeners are listening going, oh my goodness, do I need to learn more? Where would they find you?
They could find me on my website, Dr. Cindra, so DrCindra. And then my company's website is Mentally Strong Institute. And we do a lot of coaching with leaders and with athletes, executives, like people who want to realize that they are in their own way and they want to just play bigger. So what we really help people to do is increase their influence, increase their confidence, right? Which we said is just a pillar of success, and then get to their goals quicker. And I think everyone needs a coach. I've had my own coach, the same coach for 12 years, and she calls me on my stuff and helps me get out of my own way and helps me just kind of walk down from the cliff when sometimes I am thinking of the worst case, because I'm human just like you are. So you can find us more information, there, and you can find my books at drcindra.com too.
Wonderful, wonderful. I have no doubt that people are going to want to hunt you down because you've got such a wealth of knowledge and it's just so clear. It just rolls right off your tongue. It's part of who you are. It's what you've studied for over 20 years and now you're sharing it with others on Productive Joy, which is just exciting for all of us. So we want people to find you and we have some rapid fire questions to ask you before we're ever done today. Are you willing to answer them for me?
You know it. I would love to.
Okay, so excited. Okay, first question. What's your definition of fun?
My definition of fun would be doing things that you love and that you get a lot of joy from. I think things that are fun are things that you really value, and it's different for everybody, right? I think it's like being respectful that everyone has different things that they love to do for fun.
Definitely. And that's why I asked the question, because everybody's definition does not look exactly the same. Okay. How do you know that you are showing up as your authentic self?
That's a great question. I think when there's less tension in yourself and you know you're showing up as your authentic self when there's less head trash.
Mm.
You're able to be fully present when you're not hiding who you are. And I think authenticity is a practice. It's not something you just have and that you always have. It's actually something you need to keep growing in. And in some situations, we might feel like it's easier to be our authentic self, where others we might not. So the think about times where maybe you feel like you're holding yourself back, and that could be potentially, times you're not showing up as your authentic self, but you can keep practicing that just little by little.
Love that. Okay, how do you show up as your best self on your worst days?
How do I show up as my best self on my worst days? I think that's an awesome question. I think that takes a lot of self-awareness, which is practice number 4 in Beyond Grit, understanding who you are and who you are at your best. And I think I think we need practices to help us kind of start in the right headspace. I have a really cool practice called the Grit Priming Tool I can share more with you about to help you get in the right mindset. But then we need tools throughout our day to be able to reset. And I think I am able to be at my best even when I'm tired or have a lot going on or whatever that might be, whatever my barriers are that day. By knowing myself, knowing how I want to show up, knowing what my values are, and using those to guide me, and even using my purpose to guide me, right? I think that's how you can show up as your best, even when maybe you're not 100% that day.
Yeah, because we can't be 100% every day, can we? It's just not
Yeah, very
possible.
difficult.
So,
Yes.
probably the hardest question I'm going to ask you because you've said so many brilliant things, but by nature, our brains can only really hold on to one major thing in 30 minutes. So, if people can only remember one thing, what's the one major thing you want them to walk away with today, Dr. Cindra?
I want them to walk away with this idea of playing big. And so many times we let our automatic negative thoughts or our belief in ourselves, sometimes that can be lacking, and we don't really go after what we really desire. And so, I think about when I was at the Boston Marathon bombing, it did change my life. And afterwards, I just came back and I decided every day just to do one thing every day that's just a little bit scary. And so I'm just going to encourage everyone to think about like what big courageous goals that you really want. And we all need big courageous goals to go after. That's the good kind of grit that really helps us keep moving and growing. And, just do one thing every day that's just a little bit tiny scary to help you get towards that goal. And I think of courage like a muscle that you can keep learning and growing. And the more you do those courageous things, the easier it becomes.
Yeah. What a blessing you are. Thank you so much for being willing to share all of your brilliance here with this audience and for giving us so many nuggets of wisdom. So, I always at the end talk about our nuggets of wisdom, things that we're taking with us. And I wrote down a lot of things. But what I appreciated most were the practical things, right? So, you gave us a couple different specific references to your book. Go get her book, y'all. This is most definitely going to be something that you want Beyond Grit and Beyond Grit for Business. But you talked about the 3 F's. So let's see, future orientation, forcing it, and focusing on the outcome. Those are the things that will keep us out of flow, right? And we want to be in flow. You talked about the power of purpose. You talked about confidence as a whole. You talked about playing bigger. You also talked about the fact that we would live longer when we are in that right space, right? And we're paying attention. And so many more things. So, my friends, as you are listening, I want you to walk away with at least one nugget of wisdom that you can actually use, because if you don't change practice, then nothing changes. So, pick that one thing, and then today and every day, I want you to figure out a way to turn fun into action.